we've got some live breaking news now. We're going to go to those live pictures, if we can, of the plane carrying Abu Qatadah, the radical Muslim cleric, taking off from RAF Northolt Airport. This is the private military airport in West London. It is carrying Abu Qatadah, who has boarded the plane and will be on his way to Jordan in the next couple of minutes. The plane, as we can see there, just taxiing on the runway. Abu Qatadah is, of course, the man who has been trying to stay in Britain and has been fighting extradition attempts for the last 8 or 9 years or so, and only in the last month, when Britain and Jordan signed a treaty, did that attempt to fight extradition end and result in this moment right now, which involves Abu Qatadah on a plane to Jordan. He's there at RAF Northolt. I understand this is a small chartered plane. We're just watching pictures from RAF Northolt, which is a military air base. This is breaking news here on BBC that you're watching of Abu Qatadah leaving Britain on his way to Jordan. 8 or so years of fighting extradition attempts since his arrest in 2001 over. We can now see that plane taking off there. Abu Qatadah is now out of the UK and on his way to Jordan. A moment that I think many politicians in Britain perhaps at some point thought they would never see, because there'd been so many legal fights over Abu Qatadah staying in Great Britain. David Cameron, I think earlier today, had commented that he'd be happy to see the back of Abu Qatadah, who was arrested in 2001 and has been fighting extradition ever since. These are live pictures here on the BBC. It's a black sky that you can see, but those couple of lights that you can see are of the plane carrying Abu Qatadah out of Britain and on his way to Jordan, which is his country of birth. And Jordan wants him on terrorism charges, and they've had to sign a treaty with Britain which promises that they will not use any evidence gained through torture. And that's what's led to this moment now of Abu Qatadah leaving Great Britain, and he's over the skies of London. He was taken to the RAF Northolt from Belmarsh prison a couple of hours ago and under heavy police guard. I think now we can speak to our correspondent who's been following this story for years and is there at the airport, at the base, Dominic Casciani. Dominic, pick up the story from here. Abu Qatadah is gone.
He's gone, that's it. It's the end of this extraordinary legal saga that's really, it's gone on for more than a decade. An incredible saga. This man fought against deportation from the UK. In the last few minutes, we just had this incredibly dramatic moment where this jet carrying this radical preacher took off over our heads here on the western end, sorry, beg your pardon, the eastern end of RAF Northolt, with the great big familiar roar of its jet engines. It circled over us and it was away into the night sky, and that is fundamentally the end of this process. He can't appeal anymore. He's on the plane, he's on his way home. The deportation will formally end when the plane lands in Jordan in a few hours' time, where British immigration officials will hand the cleric over to the local authorities there. We understand that he will then be taken to a court for the start of the trial procedure, where he will be accused afresh of involvement in 2 terrorism plots, and that trial process will begin. But it's the end of this incredibly long chapter, and I have no doubt that throughout government tonight, those who have stayed up to watch this will be breathing an enormous sigh of relief. This is a man they thought at one point they'd never get rid of. Well, he has gone.
Dom, I just want to pick you up on that point in a moment, but first of all, did you manage to catch a glimpse of anything on the tarmac? Did you actually see him?
I'm sorry, it's very noisy here. You're going to have to repeat that question. I completely missed it.
That's okay, Dom. I was just wondering whether you did actually manage to see him board the plane. Could you see anything on the tarmac itself?
It was very difficult to see everything clearly, but we did see someone who we think was Abu Qatadeh. It was his size and shape. A man came out of the terminal building wearing long flowing white Middle Eastern robes. I've seen him wear those styles of clothing before when he's appeared in court. He walked very calmly to the plane, accompanied by a number of people. He got on board, a few other people got on board. Now we expect them to have been the human rights monitors who have come from Jordan to look after his welfare, the British officials, his Jordanian lawyer, and perhaps some of the Jordanian officials as well. They got onto the plane. The ladder, the stairs were retracted, the door was closed. The pilot made a few last-minute checks of the plane, and then it taxied from one end of the run down to one end of the runway, and it was away. The whole process has been fairly muted in many respects, taking into account the drama and the huge political tension over this man down the years. 2 hours ago he was whisked across London in this police convoy, not an enormous convoy, but a convoy big enough to ensure that he was going to get to this airport speedily and safely under cover of darkness. And then once inside, that was the last we were going to see of him on British roads, and then he was briefly processed and effectively given his deportation orders and put on the plane.
Dominic, let's talk about the politics of this. This is a huge victory for Theresa May, isn't it?
It's a very, very important moment, I think, for this Home Secretary. She's been able to achieve something which none of her predecessors were able to achieve. It's a very important moment, I think, for British governments in general, because down the years many officials and civil servants and government lawyers have worked very, very hard along with diplomats to try and get this deal. They really struggled. The key issue down the years here was about not just trying to get rid of Abu Qatadeh, but trying to do it in a way that was within the law. And the law, it's a European level, but also at British level, said that he had to be treated fairly, he had to be treated humanely, there had to be guarantees about how he was going to be treated. And they eventually got those guarantees, but it took an awful long time, but they got there. And I think that's what the success is, because despite all the political tension, for this Home Secretary, she can say she's achieved something that none of her predecessors could achieve. And it's an incredible end to this story, really, for a man who I think in the last 2 years or so has, to all intents and purposes, become public enemy #1 for this government. Well, they don't need to worry about him anymore because he's gone and he faces trial in Jordan.
Tom, we're just looking at some pictures recorded earlier of the huge police operation that it took to escort Abu Qatadeh from Belmarsh prison, where he'd been through the roads of London to RAF Northolt, where you are now. Describe what happened earlier and how this has all unfolded in the last couple of hours, if you would.
It was done, this whole operation tonight has been done very, very subtly and I think very quietly. It's not the way you'd expect, for instance, the Americans to do something like this. They wanted to, the British government wanted to play down the possibility of things going wrong. They were reluctant to talk a great deal about what was going to happen tonight. What really started the ball rolling was when we heard earlier this week that Abu Qatadeh had been told he would be deported. In the early hours of this morning, his family were told they would be allowed a final visit on Saturday afternoon. Well, that visit may or may not have happened, we're not quite sure. But then, very late on Saturday night, immigration officials arrived at Belmarsh prison. They were accompanied by police officers forming a convoy. With them, they were carrying all the legal papers for the deportation, and they explained to Abu Qatadeh what was going to happen next. That convoy then left Belmarsh prison, which is no mean feat because this prison is such a secure environment. You can't just wander in and out, so it took time to turn the vehicles round and get the whole journey underway. It went into central London, which normally on a Saturday night can be pretty difficult with the traffic, but because they chose to do this journey so late at night, the traffic was light. It went straight through central London to the opposite side of the capital and whisked in here to RAF Northolt, and it was all very, very quick, much more quickly than we expected it to happen. And it was all done almost without a fanfare this evening. There's been no, certainly so far from government, there's been no kind of crowing about this. They haven't wanted to have much of a fanfare. They just wanted to see the job done so they can say that this job is done and this man is now gone.
We're watching not live pictures, I'm sorry, these were recorded a little earlier of the convoy which escorted Abu Qatadeh to RAF Northolt, and he is on a plane to Jordan as we speak, and on the line with us is our correspondent Dominic Kashiani. Dom, what's going to happen to him when he lands in Jordan?
Well, this has always been the big issue in this case. Abu Qatadeh resisted for so long because he said he wouldn't get a fair trial. He's accused of involvement in 2 terrorism plots in Jordan, which happened actually after he'd already moved and settled in the UK. These terrorism plots were extremely serious allegations. A number of men were tried. Abu Qatadeh was convicted in his absence of effectively giving them assistance and encouragement and praising the events after they'd happened. But he always said that those convictions were based on false testimony, effectively evidence which had been extracted from his co-defendants under duress of torture. And this was the key issue in this case, was how could the man get a fair trial, and this is what he fought against and why the European Court has such reservations over his return to Jordan. Now that the guarantees are in place through this special treaty between UK and Jordan over the way he's going to be treated, he's accepted he will get a fair trial. When the plane lands, the formal deportation process ends when he's handed over to the Jordanian authorities. It will be about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning Jordanian time, a normal working day. He will be taken straight to court in Amman, where he will be told that he's facing this trial, and we expect from there he will be taken to a prison to await that trial, which may be some months off, but this is what he's been expecting. But the critical issue here is that he's left because he knew he could fight this case no longer, because the British government got a deal to protect his human rights, and that's what's brought this incredible saga to an end.